In a pitch-black underwater cave, a diver stripped off all his own gear like he was possessed. When they finally found his body, his breathing apparatus was lying right next to him, completely intact. This bizarre cave diving accident happened at the Eagle's Nest Sinkhole, located in Florida, USA. From the surface, it looks like a tiny pond just 160 feet across. But a completely different world is hidden beneath the surface. Looking at the cross-section, the entire cave is shaped like a massive tree. It plunges to a depth of over 310 feet, with a horizontal span of over half a mile. The total length of the passages is about 1 mile. The whole system isn't just a straight path to the bottom. It's a deep, complex, three-dimensional maze. In 2016, 3 divers planned an expedition to Eagle's Nest. Chris and Peacock weren't just dive buddies, they were also a couple in real life. Both had years of cave diving experience. Justin was different. He was relatively new to cave diving, so he wouldn't go into the deep sections this time. Instead, he stayed near the surface to handle logistics. According to the plan, their route was to head upstream first, enter through the pond, pass through the ballroom, go past Randy's room and the super room, and push all the way to the dome room at the end of the upstream section. Then, they would turn back to the ballroom, divert downstream into the Lockwood Tunnel, and finally surface. Because ascending requires the body to slowly adapt to pressure changes, after finalizing the plan, the two went into the water early, staging decompression and emergency tanks on the left side at 20, 70, and 120 feet deep. At 2 p.m. on October 15th, Chris and Peacock officially began their dive. Passing through a narrow vertical shaft that barely fits one person, the inner world of Eagle's Nest slowly unfolded. But they were fully prepared. Each wore a fully closed circuit rebreather, CCR. This gear recycles exhaled gas and is absolute standard for deep cave diving. They also carried 2 side-mount bailout tanks and 1 spare tank. They each had a diver propulsion vehicle, or scooter. Peacock was even towing a 3rd backup scooter behind him. In a massive cave like Eagle's Nest, spanning over half a mile, without a scooter, you simply can't reach the deep sections using just human power. They cruised along, passing through the super room. The sedimentary rocks on the cave walls displayed intertwining light and dark shades. After passing the super room, the two felt that going further that way wasn't interesting enough. So they turned around, headed back to the ballroom, and dove straight into a narrow passage called the Abyss, heading towards the Dream Room at the far downstream end. Who could have guessed that this sudden decision would drag them into a literal abyss? The two divers squeezed into the Abyss passage, heading towards the Dream Room at the far downstream end. Who could have guessed that this sudden decision would drag them into a literal abyss? After 3 p.m., Justin on the shore dove every half hour as agreed. But by almost 6 p.m., there was still no sign of his teammates at the decompression stops. He immediately grabbed his phone and called in a group of fellow divers. At 11 p.m., the first rescue team entered the water following their planned route, searching upstream first. But the decompression tanks were completely untouched. They scoured the upstream area and the ballroom until 3:30 a.m. They found absolutely nothing. At 3:45 a.m., a second rescue team organized by the police dove in, heading straight downstream. 15 minutes later, they reached the entrance of the abyss. The scene there made everyone gasp in horror. 2 bodies were floating eerily against the cave ceiling. Peacock was still wearing his rebreather, but the mouthpiece was out of his mouth, and his tanks were almost completely empty. As for Chris, his rebreather scooter and headlamp had absolutely no malfunctions. His tanks even had plenty of gas left. But all of this gear was scattered everywhere around him. 2 days later, search and rescue recovered the bodies and gear one by one. Based on the autopsy reports and dive computer logs, investigators could only piece together the truth buried in the darkness, bit by bit. At minute 43 of the dive, Chris squeezed into the abyss passage first. Peacock followed closely behind. But this passage was incredibly narrow. Their high-end gear was way too bulky, making it extremely hard to pass the bottom corner. Plus, their scooters kicked up silt from the bottom, creating a near-zero visibility silt out. So, 3 minutes later, both backed out of the abyss. At minute 58, after adjusting, Chris successfully made it around the corner. but Peacock stayed put. Because Peacock wasn't coming down, Chris, at the bottom, returned to the entrance at minute 61. From this point on, like he was possessed, Chris stripped off his rebreather and scooter, piece by piece. Seeing this, Peacock immediately shared his regulator. The two squeezed together, buddy breathing from the same tank. Judging from where the gear was scattered, they tried to struggle toward the exit, but having lost his weights, Chris couldn't sink. He was physically pinned against the cave ceiling by the buoyancy of his dry suit. That was the exact scene the police found initially. Based on the official accident data, we might deduce this. At minute 58, the reason Peacock didn't come down was likely because he got stuck at the entrance while carrying two scooters. Chris then went back to save him, but in that narrow passage, let alone rescuing someone, even turning around was nearly impossible. So he stripped off his heaviest gear, piece by piece. After successfully freeing Peacock, the two shared a single tank. They moved the discarded gear to a wider area near the entrance, trying to put it back on and escape. But Chris, missing his weights, was trapped against the ceiling by his dry suit's buoyancy. After failing to save him, Peacock chose to stay by his side until the very end, eventually running completely out of air. Of course, this is just my personal theory. The real answer will forever remain buried in that darkness. But Eagle's Nest is never short of its next victim. Late at night on July 18, 2018, 20-year-old Saeed brought a few friends to Eagle's Nest Sinkhole.